Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Artificial Intelligence Future Ready panel. I'm your host for this session. My name is Michelle Davies. I'm the Director of Partnerships Development at Ontario Centres of Excellence. I'm very excited about this panel, not only because we have an impressive lineup of artificial intelligence experts, but also because this area is applicable to all sectors. I just attended an IDC ITAC Directions 2018 event last week. And during their presentation on AI, they said that 48% of companies said that AI provides a competitive advantage to them. They also said that 35% of those companies are using or piloting AI already. 22% are planning to do so in the next 2 years. So 57% of the companies they talk to are already looking at AI and using it for part of their business. This is being driven by the lines of business, not by the IT groups, which is a very interesting dynamic and something that's a leading technology. So to get involved in this discussion, you'll be interacting with the panelists, but you can also interact on social media. Please use the hashtag OCE Discovery. To kick off today's session, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for the discussion. Our moderator is Barbara Stymiest, Chair of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, or CIFAR, the Advisory Board of the Ivey Institute for Leadership, and the CDIC Advisory Panel on Resolution. She is also the Vice Chair of AgeWell and the University Health Network. Currently, Barbara is also serving on the boards of BlackBerry, George Weston, President's Choice Bank, and Sun Life Financial. Barbara was a former member of the Group Executive for the Royal Bank of Canada. She is former CEO of TMX Group, Executive Vice President and CFO at BMO Capital Markets, and partner of Ernst & Young LLP. So Barbara alone is bringing many industry perspectives to this conversation. Let's give a warm welcome to Barbara. Over to you, Barbara.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for this panel today. As Michelle said, my background is mainly financial services, but I've also been active as a volunteer in the not-for-profit sector with a focus on healthcare and on research. I've been a board member of CIFAR since 2006, and I've had the honor of chairing our board since 2014. So a quick word on CIFAR, because I think it's a pretty seminal organization in Canada and for AI. It was founded in 1982 to create knowledge that enriches human life and leads to a better future for Canada and the world. And we do this by connecting the world's best minds through interdisciplinary research on programs that are meant to tackle questions of global significance. But I think what's most remarkable is that the very first question tackled by CIFAR resulted in the creation in 1983 of our program, Artificial Intelligence, Robotics, and Society. So it goes back a long way. I know you hear it in the media every day and every minute, but we've been talking about it for decades. I'm sure all of you know who Geoffrey Hinton is. He led our program, and he subsequently led our successor program, Learning in Machines and Brains, from 2004 to 2014. Which really is meant to understand the architecture and mechanics of the brain and how some of its processing abilities might be replicated in digital systems. And this, of course, was the foundation for deep learning. Our program now is co-led by Yoshua Bengio from University de Montreal and Jan LeCun from Facebook and NYU. Now, these three individuals, these three gentlemen, are often known as the godfathers of AI, and I think that label is richly deserved. I'm very proud of this program that we've had and the fact that it has brought together the finest minds in the world on AI. And I'm also very lucky that I have a ringside seat at the table to listen to them from time to time and to keep abreast of the progress that they're making. And I think it's also very clear that Canada is a real player in AI. And to quote our CEO, Alan Bernstein, the key to Canada's success has been alignment, the willingness of all moving parts in this ecosystem of AI to align for common purpose. And for those of you in the kickoff session today, we heard a lot about ecosystem, and we heard a lot about collaboration. And since Discovery is Canada's premier innovation to commercialization conference, I think aligning our ecosystem around AI to achieve better outcomes is paramount, as we know that AI is probably the most transformative technology of our day. In fact, only last week, the Dean of Engineering at Waterloo gave some other statistics to emphasize what Michelle just said. The Dean of Engineering quoted a survey by MIT and the Boston Consulting Group indicating that 85% of companies believed AI would give them a competitive advantage, but also in that survey indicated that only 20% of the companies had actually built it into their businesses. So I think that's the opportunity, and I think today we can accelerate the take-up of AI by both the incumbent industry players and our large and growing entrepreneurial community. On our panel today, I'm delighted that we have such great representation from many parts of the ecosystem, from an AI startup company, the Vector Institute, and from CFAR. I think we're going to have a great discussion. And before we begin, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce herself, and then we'll dive into our discussion. So, Megan?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Megan Anderson. I am a Business Development Director at Integrate.ai. Before that, I was at McKinsey, where I focused on large-scale digital transformations and got really excited about specifically AI while I was there, which made me make the jump to join Steve Irvin as employee number 1 at Integrate. So I bring and for those who don't know what Integrate does, we help B2C enterprises integrate AI into their business processes to drive consumer outcomes. So yeah, that's me.
Hey, Allison.
And I'm Allison Paprisa. I'm the Vice President of Health Strategy and Partnerships at the Vector Institute. Prior to joining Vector, I worked at the Institute for Clinical Evaluative Sciences. You may know them as the organization that holds data for all publicly funded health services going back 20 and in some cases 30 years, so longitudinal population-wide health data holdings. And they also have processes in place to make the data available for research and health system improvement studies. And prior to that, I worked at the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care as the Director for the Planning, Research and Analysis branch. I'm a chemist by training and started my career in pharma.
Great. And Alyssa.
Hi everyone, I'm Alyssa Strom. I'm the Executive Director of the Pan-Canadian AI Strategy at CFAR. And I've been at CFAR now since January of this year. I was really excited to join the team as we work with the 3 centers of excellence of AI research across the country. I'll tell you a little bit more about those. To implement Canada's national AI strategy, which the federal government announced last year. So it's a really, really exciting time in AI research. I'm really, really proud to be part of it and having a great time. Prior to joining CFAR, I was at U of T for 9 years as a senior research administrator, and most recently I was executive director of SOCIP, which is a research consortium in partnership with OCE, so I know OCE very well, and I've been at Discovery many years, and there's a SOCIP booth here today if you're interested in learning more about them. And my background is in neuroscience, so I have a PhD in neuroscience from UBC.
Great. Well, let's dive in, and I'm going to start with Allison. As one of the founding members of Vector's leadership team, we heard from your boss in the session just prior, and I know it's an exciting time for the organization. And so I thought that we had a bit of time actually to get into the mission of Vector and how it's performing in its early days, if we can start there.
Sure. Well, I would start by saying, I joined Vector in November to a team that was maybe 8 people. We still all fit around one table, so every now and then someone will say, "Oh, have you met Alan Bierman, COO?" And I say, "Yeah, we've met. Literally, we sit in one room all together on a regular basis." I've worked in government and innovation for years, and it's absolutely remarkable how quickly the Vector Institute has grown with CFAR support. So from a little over a year ago, an announcement and an empty floor in the Mars building, we have a populated space, we have about 100 students that have been brought on board, 22 world-class faculty, we're maybe up to 17 or 18 staff. Our CEO joined us in January. So it's breakneck speed as far as getting a new institute off the ground goes. Part of what really attracts me to Vector is this interest in being bold and being excellent, in capitalizing on Ontario and Canada's research strength and turning that into economic and social benefits for Canadians. So it's very much a place of doers, a place where academics can meet with industry and government and get things done. I can talk a little bit more about the health strategy later if you like.
I think why don't we go there next?
Okay.
And given my background, the amount of time I spend at UHN, I'm really interested in you perhaps setting the scene for us in terms of a little bit more specifically. We heard about Sophia today and the potential use cases in healthcare, but I'd love to hear the Vector and the Allison perspective on AI in healthcare.
Sure. Well, I was smiling because wickedly I said to Alyssa after seeing Sophia, I wanted to, answer my questions like this and pretend to be a slightly more advanced robot, but I'll refrain. Where we are, thanks. Actually, literally, probably this week or next, we're going to be putting out what we call our Phase 1 health strategy for Vector. And having had the privilege of speaking to, I'm going to say, probably 60 or 70 different groups since I joined in November, there's the realization that the ecosystem is active when it comes to health AI in Ontario. And to start, the role of Vector is in making sure that we've got the strongest foundation, not just for Vector faculty, but for the ecosystem as a whole. And there are 3 things that we're going to focus on. One is world-class research. So that's what Vector is known for in terms of the folks we've recruited already. And in collaboration with centers like the Peter Munk Cardiac Center at UHN, we're going to help others bring world-class talent to Ontario to help grow the ecosystem. So that's one of the 3. I'll go down to the bottom because a real advantage for Ontario, and one that Vector has a role in ensuring we capitalize on, is the fact that we have a large single-payer health system with population-wide data holdings, again going back 20 or 30 years in some cases. So you will find for sure larger HMOs in the States, they'll have deeper, maybe cleaner, maybe better data. But if someone changes their employer with one of those HMOs, the thread of what's happened to them can be lost. You may no longer know if they were hospitalized, for example, a few years following a procedure, what their cancer outcomes were, et cetera. So us having population-wide data holdings for the entire population, covering a diverse population, literally represents a data advantage that, if managed well and in a trustworthy manner, can attract researchers from around the world where we can generate new knowledge that literally wouldn't be possible in any other jurisdiction. So the second of the 3 is research-ready, accessible data for AI. And the third is widespread application. And when we say widespread application, we have to be careful to note that while Vector, as a research institute, has a focus on machine learning and deep learning in particular, when we talk application, we mean data science broadly. It can be anything AI-related. So the 1,000 Aims master's program that Garth mentioned earlier is data science, including natural language processing, intelligent medicine, intelligent robotics, yes, machine learning and deep learning, but much more. Our goal there is to go to 1,000 graduates per year, 1,000 master's graduates per year within 5 years. So essentially, we're going to make it such that we're not limited in any way by lack of talent. Tommy Patanin, one of the thought leaders for the foundation of Vector, says we can be the only jurisdiction in the world where we have a surplus of AI talent. And we know we got the data. We know that we got the world-class research. We have policymakers on the health side and decision makers that are very interested in evidence-informed decisions. Bring that together with the compute power, we feel that we can be a world leader in health applications of AI.
Great. I'm going to come back to Allison in a minute to talk about maybe some short-term potential wins and maybe long-term applications. But why don't I turn to Megan, get Megan involved in the conversation. I know you've got, I think, a non-technical background. You do have a strategy background. But you are deeply entrenched in the business of AI, and I think you can speak to many of the non-technical entrepreneurs in the room. And so when we talk about the, if you look at that statistic that both Michelle and I cited about everyone thinking they need to do something in AI, but not everyone actually having a plan, can you give us your advice on what they should do next?
Yeah.
How they should get started?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's funny. You get very used to being on panels where you're the only one without a PhD. So, but yes, I think a few things I'd say about getting started with AI. One is just start. So scope a use case, and scope a use case as defined by a business outcome, not by a technical capability. and get going, whether you need to partner with someone to make it happen, whether you need to create an internal SWAT team to make it happen. But I think you can create a lot of organizational energy around an initial quick win. And so that would be my first piece of advice, would be just start somewhere. The second piece around kind of creating a broader roadmap is to first define a roadmap in terms of use cases. Again, outcomes you're looking to drive as opposed to technical capabilities you're looking to build. If you start with the outcomes you're looking to drive and structure a roadmap that way, you can then say, okay, out of these use cases, which are the ones we think we want to build internally because we're really outsourcing a core capability if we try to outsource this, and which are the ones we want to partner to build. And then once you have that roadmap, you can then double click and say, okay, now what are the capabilities I need to build in order to make this happen? Whether that be infrastructure, whether that be people, whether that be DevOps, whatever, you can build out that supporting roadmap. And then the final comment I'll make, and this is kind of the least tactical, but I think it's an important one, is creating that mindset shift in your organization around seeing the world as a set of probabilities versus kind of black and whites. So I think the biggest challenge, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this one, the biggest challenge sometimes is that people have a really hard time outsourcing a decision to a computer that they think is like a yes/no decision, and what if the computer gets it wrong? When really these systems just work with probabilities, and I mean we as humans have always made decisions based on probabilities. We're just not always super explicit about it. So I think there's kind of a broader mindset shift required, but those would be kind of the 3 steps I would take. Just start, build out a roadmap as defined by business outcomes, and start working on some of these broader mindset shifts.
So just a follow-up question, because the answer that you gave is an internal answer about what should you do within your own corporate entity. Can you help us think about how do you tap into the ecosystem? We talked a lot about ecosystem so far today, and we've got a lot of people from the ecosystem in the room, so how do you tap in?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of opportunity and possibility with a young ecosystem, but then again, there's the challenge that it is a young ecosystem, and not everyone has completely baked product strategies that are always easy to wrap your head around. So it's a great question. I think once you have your roadmap and you've decided what use cases you do want to partner on, I think it's talking to, and this is maybe a bit of an annoying answer, but it's talking to a bunch of the startups in the ecosystem and figuring out where there's the best fit. And I know the Vector Institute is working on some things of helping bridge that gap between the ecosystem and enterprises. So I think, yeah, that's the way to start, though, is through use cases so that you can be explicit about the outcome you're looking to drive before you pick a partner to help you drive towards that outcome.
Great. I have one more question for Megan. As we think about really the kind of primary and driver for AI being fundamentally increasing productivity and perhaps changing the nature of work to be less rote or routine and more really focused on conceptual and people skill issues. So I think that leads us to what I hope we have a few minutes to talk about, discussions around job loss, bias, privacy, consent, non-inclusivity, the overconcentration of capital. I mean, I think the list is quite endless, but I really wanted Megan in this kind of post-Facebook, post-breach era that we live in, or constant breaches, I guess would be a better description, to give us your views on how the public will be able to trust AI, and how are we going to be able to get over that kind of hurdle around trust to be able to adopt it widely and benefit from its predictive power.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a top-down answer here and a bottom-up answer here. And the high-level answer is there is no silver bullet. A lot of these things are being worked through, and it's going to take ongoing discussion and conversation, and it's going to take the coming together of enterprise and policy and consumers, and it's going to be a multidisciplinary answer, I think, as everyone in this room probably knows. But I think when it comes to consumers, the good news is that consumers actually have a lot of power based on the tools and services that they decide to use. And so the bottom-up answer, I think, is as consumers, we need to be curious about the products we're using. And I think the question that really brings to light a lot of things is, how does this company make money? Especially if they're not charging you for the thing that you're using. So be curious about how whatever you're using makes money, and that usually brings you to a trail of, are they selling your data? Are they, what are they doing to make money? And the good news is that as a consumer, you have a lot of power just based on what you decide to use, because these businesses make money by the number of consumers that they can enlist to use their products. So that's the kind of bottom-up answer. I think the good news is consumers are getting smarter, so it is good business to be trustworthy and privacy compliant and all of these things. We have actually, over the last few months, reoriented a complete part of our team to be exclusively focused on trust, because we believe it'll be a huge competitive advantage for us as we kind of go forward. I think the top-down answer is executives and leaders in B2C organizations need to get really good at communicating what they're trying to do with data based on the outcomes they're looking to drive. So I don't think we're ever going to get to a space where consumers can be versed enough in all the latest and greatest in privacy techniques. There are so many, like differential privacy. I mean, there are so many and new ones coming all the time. But I think if leaders and executives can be super explicit about the outcome they're looking to drive with the data that they're using, then the technique becomes actually secondary to the outcome they're looking to drive. So that's the kind of, and we see a big part of our strategy as being helping executives to get there, to help be explicit about the outcomes they're looking to drive, and then to help them figure out how to get there in a privacy compliant way. So I think that's the kind of bottom-up and top-down look at the situation.
Great. Okay, well, we'll have more questions for Megan later as well. So I have the opportunity of working with Alyssa at CFAR, and I think most people know that the federal government announced the Pan-Canadian AI strategy in the March 2017 budget, and that commitment through ISED for the $125 million I think really has been a huge boost to the development and utilization of AI in Canada. And of course, CFAR is playing a critical role there, and that's Alyssa's day job. So Alyssa, we've heard a little bit from Allison. We'll hear some more. But in your work with Vector and the other two national, or the other two AI institutes in the country, how are they engaging with industry, and how would you gauge the level of interest in what the institutes are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a critical piece of the puzzle. The Pan-Canadian AI strategy is really focused on supporting and enhancing research excellence in the academic sector. But of course, we also very much need to be partnering very closely with industry. And so each of the three AI institutes have really sort of found their own flavor and their own strategy and their own approach to partnering with industry. And of course, the interest is huge, absolutely massive, and more, in fact, than what any one AI institute can really manage right now at the period of startup that they're in right now. So Vector Institute, as our example here in Ontario, has a really comprehensive strategy and approach to partnering with industry, and it was really fundamental and foundational to the establishment of the Vector Institute, which was bringing industry partners into the establishment of the Institute from the very beginning. And so Vector has, I think, today something like 41 industry sponsors and partners that they're working with very, very closely. And those range from large multinational corporations, SMEs, and startup companies as well too. And so I think that's what I mean by comprehensive. As an example, the Vector is working with the entire ecosystem of industry players and also across many sectors. So of course, partnership with big tech companies is really important for us in Canada. We certainly want to make sure that we are partnering with Microsoft and Google and IBM and Facebook. But obviously, there's huge opportunity for the adoption and the implementation of AI innovation and technologies into lots of different sectors, and especially sectors where Canada has an opportunity to lead and innovate, like healthcare as a great example, natural resources as another great example, transportation as a phenomenal example. And so I think, again, Vector's doing a great job of also working with industry players across many, many different sectors. I would say at the other AI institutes, they're taking, an approach that makes sense for their specific ecosystem and for their research strengths as well, too. And so matching the expertise of the AI institutes with the industry demand is also really critical. And so we're seeing that that's the approach that they're taking. And again, I would say at all three places, the real interest from industry is, of course, learning how to adopt these technologies, learning how to think about implementing them into their business processes, but also clearly focused on talent and how can the companies start to recruit and attract great young people who have skills in machine learning and artificial intelligence more broadly into their companies and then drive innovation and commercialization forward.
So I think, Alyssa, that leads naturally to my next question, which is, given our marching orders around attracting and recruiting and retaining world-class AI researchers to the institutes, can you comment on how we're meeting that objective? And very important to, I think, the future success of Canada.
Absolutely. So it's a really exciting and fundamental piece of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy is to recruit some of the world's leading researchers in AI to come to Canada so that they will attract great research teams around them. Their students and postdocs will come as well too, and they'll attract new students and postdocs from around the world. But also to retain some of the great expertise that we have here in Canada. And so we have one primary mechanism that we're using to enhance sort of Canada's talent pool and Canada's leadership in AI research. And that's a program called the Canada CFAR Chairs in AI. And so again, working very closely with all three institutes, we're in a very exciting and I would say aggressive period of recruiting right now for bringing researchers into Canada. I'm starting to receive nominations in for these chair positions. I would say by next year we will have filled many of the 50 spots that we have. We're trying to recruit at least 25 world-class researchers from around the world to come to Canada and retain another 25 and name all of those 50 researchers as Canada CFAR chairs in AI. I expect really, Barb, as an update, by the end of the summer, I think we'll be at 20. So the nominations are really coming in quite quickly. And we're seeing broad interest from around the world. So certainly a lot of interest from people coming from the US into Canada, but also people who've been trained internationally and overseas and are interested in joining Canada and joining the great AI research ecosystems that we have in our three major centers.
Great. So just a moment ago, I think Megan got us talking about the issue of trust and privacy, and I know that really there are an incredible number of policy and legal and ethical issues in AI, and certainly in the direction that we have as running the strategy at CFAR, one of our jobs is to convene some of the best thinkers around solving the unintended consequences around AI. So can you comment on what we're doing in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, as part of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, having a dedicated research program that looks at the societal implications was actually going to be critical to our success as a country in this field. And so a key aspect of the program is a program that CFAR is launching and facilitating called AI in Society. And we're really looking at the policy, the economic, the legal, the ethical implications of AI very broadly. And I think what's really exciting about this part of the program is that it's international in scope. And so we have a mandate to be working with partners around the world, both researchers, but also government and other agencies around the world to really bring together some tremendous thought leadership on these questions. And so as an example, just recently we launched a call for proposals for AI in Society workshops, and you're welcome to take a look at the CFAR website where you'll see that that call is open. And again, it's really an international in scope. And so certainly we're looking for Canadian researchers and Canadian experts on any aspect related to AI in society to bring together a team and a network of people to start to talk about these issues, and particularly how we can address them. What do we need to do? What are the opportunities for developing frameworks around ethics? What are the opportunities for developing policy? So that program is up and running. We're also running a series of policy labs with early career civil servants across the country, so that government agencies can also start to think about how and when and where does it make sense to implement AI technologies into their products and services. And I think thirdly, and really important, a really important leadership opportunity that CFAR is playing right now is in working with other research agencies and other governments around the world to really start to think about where are some of the best practices, where are the opportunities for us to work together across borders to start to build some policy and regulatory frameworks around AI.
So I said I'd go back to Allison, and so my question is a broad one, which you can answer wearing either your healthcare hat or your vector hat, but where do you see the largest impacts in the short term from AI? And so answer it either way you want, healthcare or pick another vertical.
Both. Whole non-Sophia person. I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to take the opportunity to build on some of what my fellow panelists have said here. The first message is there are absolutely short-term things that can be done. It's very exciting to be out there talking to people. One group that I wanted to call attention to is Cameron Can and his company Blue Dot, which I gather started with OCE funding and then went through Mars Innovation. And what they do is they use publicly available data about flights and infectious diseases as a way to work with national level organizations like the Public Health Agency of Canada and the CDC to control infectious outbreaks. And they do that all with publicly available data and AI. Last week, we met with someone from McMaster who's got a system that uses EEG and machine learning to predict when someone's going to come out of a coma. Who doesn't want that to happen, right? There's no downside whatsoever. And the reason that I bring this up in this way is that sometimes when some of the young entrepreneurs are coming in to speak with us, or I meet with them at conferences, people, for whatever reason, tend to be going for these applications that honestly might take 5 or 7 years to get approved if there was no computer involved whatsoever. So a whole new way to diagnose cancer, or a complete overhaul of some system. And generally, we absolutely want that. I mean, I really appreciated myself this morning that we went from sort of the inspirational Sophia to a panel that really talked about practical things like food regulation and food monitoring that are happening right now on the ground. So in healthcare, what I would say to someone who's just getting started in this is to really think about what you can do with data sources that are not terribly sensitive. Sometimes, young entrepreneurs come in, really what they're saying is they want to access individual level data, they might want to access sensitive data, for example, around mental health, and the truth is they're not proven to the health stakeholders. If you channel your inner patient, you may not want your data out there that widely, is the truth of the matter. But the message is that doesn't mean that your hands are tied. There's a lot that can be done with publicly available data, by working with organizations that have full governance frameworks for managing their data. And I think over time, by starting with those opportunities that are ripe right now, by being outcome focused, by doing it in a way that respects what we call social license, the users and uses of data that the public supports, we're going to build the case for more and bigger applications in the future. So I don't want that in any way to sound like a wet blanket on people's aspirations. It's more a practical path to really widespread impact, which necessarily involves being trustworthy in the work that we do and how we work with data.
Can I add one thing to that, actually?
Please.
So just to build on the question you asked earlier of how best to tap into the ecosystem, I think choosing a practical use case with some low-hanging fruit is super key, because it also lets you move quickly once you have engaged a startup and get a POC going quickly. I mean, speaking from a startup standpoint, the the hardest thing about being in a startup with a large enterprise is they want you to talk to 80 different stakeholders. They want you to sign like 14 legal agreements, signing your life away. That like sometimes the upfront work just to get in the door at some of these large enterprises can really kill startups, especially, I mean, we're lucky to have a lot of funding at Integrate, but for startups that aren't as well funded, it's harder when there are these huge kind of immediate blockers. But those bars are much lower when you choose safer use cases.
And the other thing, if I could add, is this is some advice coming out of a fellow that's doing really innovative work at New York University. But he said, you know, a general good place to start is you look at some process that has a risk stratification or a classification step in it, where you already know what to do based on the risk score, and you ask, you know, are there data that we're not using that we could be using for better effect? And you see these all over the healthcare system, whether it's choice of cancer treatment or prediction of adverse reactions or helping someone with congestive heart failure not go to the emergency room unless they absolutely need to. You know, there's data all around. And if you really want to show that you make a difference, go for that, you know, prediction step, make it 100 times better, and people know how to respond to the better prediction without 100% certainty as well, right? It doesn't have to be black or white, but it's better than the prediction that the humans could make in the absence of the data and the AI.
Great, thanks, Allison. So the mics are open. Please feel free to just signal us and let us know if you've got a question. We have lots more time. If I could maybe ask, and I don't know if there's also an opportunity, I think, for questions to come in through Twitter. So we have one here.
Yes, we do. Hello. Wonderful panel, by the way. I'd just like to, this might be a bit of a tricky question, but I'm curious to see what your response would be to this. So you've touched on the idea that how this revolution may affect the job market, but when looking back 20 or maybe 10 or maybe 20 years, how do you think being able to do more, and then also simultaneously the expectation to do more, is going to affect the mental health of the employees?
Anyone on the panel want to tackle that?
I think that we need to consider it. So just to draw one parallel, this is one of the things that came out of the leaning of hospitals, right? That people found that it was, you know, you could save time by not having to walk to the printer, but that meant that you were literally not moving around anymore. And so, you know, what Megan was saying about, you know, bottom down checking in with people, I think especially for the first applications, you really want to be looking at something that ideally is welcome, maybe solves a problem, maybe it's completely routine work that someone finds very stressful and hard to stay focused on. Or if not welcome, at least threat-free, right? You're not going into something that a human would say, I really don't trust a machine can do that. So maybe it's like predicting when a battery's going to go on a fetal heart monitor. You know, like, again, it's good news. Everyone says yes, yes, yes. And then you build from there in the way that makes sense. I don't want to minimize it and pretend that that's the whole answer to AI in society. I mean, clearly this has the potential to be disruptive. But I think a guiding principle should be talk to the people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of what you're doing and check in that they're actually seeing it as a benefit, right?
And maybe I could just add, because I spend a lot of time at UHN and think about their strategies a lot. And when I think about a neuro strategy for Toronto or Ontario or nationally, and I think about the opportunity to use technology, I think we need some fundamental revamping of how we think about mental health. So, you know, we currently have a bit of a split in the medical world between the psychiatry profession and the neurological profession, and we have splits along disease lines. We don't have very much collaboration and cross-fertilization about actually how to address mental health. I actually think that the horizontal nature of some of the newer technologies, including AI, actually is going to bring some of those disparate silos together in the medical field to solve some of the mental health issues. So, you know, we need to think differently about how we solve mental health, because I think that the impact on mental health is going to be impacted by what we do on a day-to-day basis. But whether we think about, you know, neuromodulation technologies or small molecule pharma or, you know, other sorts of interventions across the spectrum of diseases, then I think we are going to learn a lot by the use of technology writ large. So next question here.
Thank you.
Hi there. It's kind of funny that the workforce question came up so quickly, because my question's actually about the other side of the workforce, because we have the side of the workforce that is ripe to be disrupted, if you will, but we also have the other side of the workforce, which is ripe to implement all these wonderful solutions. So there is the dedication to putting out 1,000 grad students per year in order to help with this effort, but where do you see the rest of the workforce coming from?
Sorry, the last part?
The rest of the workforce, because it's going to take a lot more than 1,000 people to implement all these changes. Where does everybody else come from?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit coming from a non-technical background. I think actually that the skills required to implement these changes are a lot broader than computer scientists. And I think sometimes we think about this and these implementations a little bit too narrowly. There's a lot of work to be done on defining exactly what needs to be built, designing what needs to be built, and designing what needs to be built from a perspective of what are the needs of the business, what are the needs of the consumers, and that takes a lot of skill sets, not just computer science. So I'm excited as we get further and further down this path. I'm excited about us kind of expanding our minds as to what skills we need and who can bring those skills to bear, and helping kind of give people who come from different backgrounds the confidence to know that they have skill sets that can be impactful in this sector. And again, I speak a lot on the topic to people coming from business backgrounds to help them make the jump into these sectors, because we need a lot of perspectives, not just engineers. Engineers are awesome, but we need lots of skills at the table.
Yeah, I would echo what Megan's saying, and not only do we need lots of diverse people with lots of different skills who are interested in this ecosystem and building up this ecosystem, but we also need to retrain people at a later stage in life. That's going to be really critical long term to our strategies. So yes, we are focused right now in Canada very much on young people and giving young people the skills to be able to have great careers in AI-related fields, but we're also definitely, in order to be strategic and successful as a company, we're going to have to think about continuing studies and longer-term opportunities and sort of mid-career pivots and training opportunities for people who have already had some experience in business or in industry or in some other field. So.
Very cool.
I'll just add, so right now in writing in the vector plan, we have 1,000 aims, which includes core technical AI masters and what we call complementary masters. So this is the business, the health, the environmental science, people who work with core technical. That's within the 1,000. We also have Endless Summer School for our industry sponsors. We're working with CFAR on the CFAR Summer School, and we're going to do tailored training for the Ministry of Health and health agencies that want it, more sort of like two-day data science. But even that's not the whole answer, right? Because it's as Garth said, if we get ahead of this, then we have companies that are prospering. And it's the salespeople that they hire, and it's the people that, that's, and they're not all going through master's programs.
Yeah.
Like that's where we want to be on this.
I must admit, I'm kind of up here for a bit of a shameless plug, because I work for Durham College. We have a program where we are trying to do this.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a partner inside the college system, I'm going to leave a
Okay,
card up on the table
excellent.
there.
Yeah. We were aware of your program, actually. It came up at an AI for Executives session we had, so there you go.
You don't even know how much that makes my heart
It's
flutter to
absolutely
even hear
true.
about that.
Yeah, college will probably be, again, there's so much data that we are not making use of, right? And
I
people
know.
are ready wherever they are in their
even
careers.
just StatsCan data.
Yeah.
Like just stitching StatsCan data into your data sets, by the way.
Yeah.
And I can't say anything more about that because NDAs.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank
thanks.
you.
And just one more comment before we take our next question, that in the professions, it's been the way of life for decades to have continuing professional education requirements, and so that is mandated from the outside. I think what we need to shift really the educational system to be one of continuous learning. So it's no longer episodic where you finish high school, you finish university, maybe grad school, but it's a career lifelong process, and we have to figure out what are the pulls and pushes to make sure that everybody is investing in their own personal development that they're, you know, we're human beings, we need a little push, but we also need to kind of instill that drive inside people to lead them to be curious, to lead them to want to learn. You know, it's always appealing to perhaps watch the Stanley Cup playoffs or the NBA playoffs, but you can also read a great book. You can also, you know, somehow invest in your own education. So with that little preaching, I'll go to the next question.
Thank you. Howard Goodfellow, University of Toronto. I have a question on when we talk about future ready and we look at our global challenges of a low carbon economy and thinking where do we see the role for AI? Because I think there is some low hanging fruit and there's also disruptive. And I think how can we accelerate, I guess, for the low hanging fruit and also build for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to jump in on this one.
we should
So
talk
I think it's a tremendous opportunity to adopt and implement machine learning and AI technologies to address those large questions that are facing society. So climate change is a great one. And at CFAR, one of our core research programs is a program called Bio-Inspired Energy. And historically, it's been looking at how do we model new technologies and new solutions for energy that are based on photosynthesis. Well, now the program is starting to adopt machine learning and think about how can we use machine learning for new materials discovery to address, you know, the energy challenges and climate change issues. And so we've been working with the government in the U.S., the Department of Energy in the U.S. more specifically, and the Mexican government on a program to develop a roadmap for material science discovery using artificial intelligence, and that's through mission innovation. And so it's happening, and we're seeing it across many different of the questions that are facing society, not just climate, but health, across transportation. And so I think it's you know, it's a disruptive opportunity that we're seeing right now, but also a tremendous opportunity for positive social, economic, and environmental impact too.
And I'm sure you saw that we had Mark Carney was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and you know, they've been leading in Europe with the further disclosure around the risks of climate change, partly in the financial sector, but broadly. And I think the real takeaway for me in that panel discussion was, you know, it's very binary that there will be some disruptive change that is going to impact not just us as an energy producing nation, but the follow-on effects of rapid dislocation and climate related technologies will be massive. And I think that what was interesting to me is the world is tilted, and that almost everybody that was there actually believes it to be a significant risk and one that's coming sooner and sooner. And I think that the use of AI in this arena will be quite striking. So, great question, thank you. Next.
Hey, so I'm a student, undergrad student here in Ontario, and actually recently I've kind of been questioning what it really means to be a student. Does that mean being physically at an institution? And with regards to AI, and I'm an economics student actually, so I hear a lot of talks about investing in these graduate programs that would train about 1,000 students currently. But I'd like your opinion on open source learning, and how do you, what is your opinion on open source learning? Because as an economics student, it seems pretty unsustainable with technology rapidly improving so quickly that our institutions can't really afford to adapt their programs constantly. So as far as e-learning goes, and just third-party training, what's your opinion on that?
I'm not an education expert, but until our education expert joins Vector in July, we have been have had a lead role in the 1,000 Aims initiative. Though honest, so as a non-expert, I'll just answer from a personal perspective more than someone pedagogically responding. I think it depends on the individual, right? We want a range of options available. Some of our faculty have some great open source learning materials out there. depending on who you are and your background and how you learn, that might take you a good part of the way. I have heard from university professors that part of their interest in 1,000 Aims is they have very, very talented undergrads who can easily get jobs. And as professors, they're saying, oh, if they would just stay another year and a half, 2 years, their future is going to be so much more open. And I see the truth in that too. There's something to be said for being in a place, not sitting down after work and trying to take in information, but really a focused effort on your learning. So I think what you're going to see is there are a range of options available. And building on what Barbara said, I think the other thing is, as a society, that it's not ever going to stop. Like, I've learned a lot coming into this job, I can tell you. I'm no education expert, I'm no data scientist, but it's great that there are sources out there that you can learn from. And then formal programs as well. So I guess that would be my answer. And one of the things we were absolutely intending to do with 1,000 Aims is put scholarships out there, especially for those first cohorts of students. So in some cases, these may be full cost recovery programs, more like what people are used to seeing for an MBA. And we want to make sure that we help the first cohorts go through. And the expectation is, the internships themselves may pay more than the tuition, and certainly the jobs upon graduation are going to be quite well paying. And the advantage of that is you can create programs then that are more nimble because they're not tied to government subsidies. Institutions would have more flexibility, for example, to say, we're increasing tuition by this much because we want to give our students access to high performance computing. They'd have that ability in a way that they might not with a traditional program. So, range of options. It's good timing for you.
Yeah. I would echo that. I mean, I think there is something still important, and maybe it's not 4 years, maybe it's one. I don't know what the right time period is, but there's something around learning how to learn and getting the kind of foundational frameworks and tools in place before you're launched into the world. And then I think these kind of ongoing or open source resources are hugely impactful. Like on machine learning, there's some amazing courses on Coursera and that can help you as you go. But I wouldn't want us to undervalue that learning how to learn period in life, which I don't know, I benefited from greatly. So.
And I would just say one last thought on this is that when you're looking at the range of tools and courses and opportunities that are available out there, open source and e-learning, one of the really important considerations is quality control, making sure you're learning the best material from the best sources. And of course, employers are looking for people who have been trained and have skills and have some credential or credibility from the training that they've got as well too. So, open source and e-learning is fantastic, but it's got to really be coming from a trusted source, both for you and also for your future employer.
Thank you.
I just thought I'd take an opportunity because I know that the conference kicked off with a discussion about the strength of Ontario, the strength of Canada, and just thought that this group of panelists might have a view on what they think of progress in other parts of the world. I mean, it's only been the last week that the huge announcement around Europe and its AI Institute hit the wires. So when we think about what we're investing and what we're doing, I think it's always useful to look more broadly outside of Canada.
Yeah, so certainly a lot of activity around the world. I mean, all jurisdictions, advanced economies certainly are really thinking about how they can strategically adopt and integrate AI into their economy. Lots of activity in Europe, as Barb mentioned. Great research strengths, obviously great industrial strengths as well in Europe. And so I think we'll see with this new AI institute that they've created, we'll see a really active and healthy ecosystem, and hopefully we'll see some exchange as well between North America and Europe, because they've been pretty isolated research ecosystems so far. China, of course, is a really, really dedicated economy. They've invested billions into AI research and growing their AI economy. And I think that we'll see some really strong advances coming out of China very, very quickly, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I'm super excited about a lot of the investments Canada has made. I think we have a head start on research. Where I would love to see us really focus next is scaling up companies, which is where Canada hasn't had the historical advantage or has the greatest track record with. I think over the last 5 years, almost 200 Canadian firms have been sold, 70% to US companies. So research is amazing, but we need to turn that research into economic benefit, and we need to keep that economic benefit owned by Canadians. So I'm really interested in what we do over the next few years to really support scaling companies, and that's going to have a lot to do with how we support startups, but also how we support traditional enterprises in working with startups and working with them efficiently so that we can scale some of these companies that we're starting, and that we've started a lot of companies as an ecosystem over the last few years. So it'll be exciting to see them scale.
So health data and health AI, with modest investments, we can be among the best in the world. And there are networks internationally that we're already connected to, and look forward to partnering them. Partnering is absolutely the name of the game in health. I would agree with Megan. Where we lack is business R&D generally. Our vector sponsors are standout outliers in all the right way and making multi-million-dollar investments in research and development, but we need much more of that. Our business R&D in Canada is generally low, and it's been declining over the years, and that's where, if we can inspire people like the businesses here at all levels to do more R&D, then that's where we need to go, I think. And that's where, certainly compared to the States, we're nowhere, and even compared to Europe, but we're not doing as well as we could. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Allison. Last question?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
China has a huge amount of data that Canada doesn't have. And I'm no expert, but this is a huge advantage, I think, that China has. What are we doing in Canada to compensate for that?
That's a tough question because, of course, the legislation is completely different in China. There are social and cultural differences around data, and so I'm not sure that we can or that we want to be competing directly with China on data explicitly. But what we can do in Canada is make sure that we are partnering together within this country to make sure that we have really strong, really diverse, really accessible, really massive data sets that can be available for R&D and for commercialization as well. And so that's something certainly that is part of the implementation of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, is making sure that not only do we have great researchers and they have great students to work with, but also that they have the technology and the data that they need in order to really drive innovation.
Yeah, and I think if we can be forward-leading on the trust and privacy frameworks, that'll help us export our products to the rest of the world, where they might run into some blocks, because some of their advantage comes from, kind of, you alluded to, maybe some more open privacy considerations, and which will be harder when it comes to finding their next market outside of China. So I think if we can be forward-leaning on trust and privacy, it's important to see that in the short term, not as something that's slowing us down, but something that will be an advantage.
And I would only just put a plug in as a fiduciary in my role on boards, that it's really, really important that corporations have a clear view on the value of the data and their policies around data and their processes around data. And it's a new world out there, and we all know how data-dependent AI is. So the companies themselves need to steward, manage, protect, leverage. There's so much to be done with the data that they create every minute of every day, and it's a changing world out there. So lots to be done from a corporate asset perspective. Okay, I think we are coming near the end of our time, and I think that if there's no more questions, I'm going to turn it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Barbara, for leading a great discussion. I'd also like to thank Megan, Allison, and Alyssa for sharing their experience on such a robust and important topic. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to be with us today. On our behalf, please accept a token of appreciation from us. I don't know where they went. They were here. There they are. For your time today and for the really scintillating discussion that I think is really just the beginning of AI for all of us. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And to those of you in the audience, please enjoy the rest of Discovery. We're just getting started. We've got another full day of this tomorrow, so lots to see and do. Thank you for being here.